Hollywood in the 1940s was a factory of illusions. They sold you dreams, they sold you romance, and when they sold you crime, they usually wrapped it in a nice, safe package. Humphrey Bogart? He was tough, sure, but he had a heart of gold hidden under that trench coat. James Cagney? He was electric, but you knew it was a performance. You knew that when the director yelled cut, Cagney would go home to his farm and paint landscapes. But in 1947, a movie came out that broke the unspoken agreement between the screen and the audience. The movie was called Born to Kill, and the man starring in it, he didn't have a heart of gold. He didn't paint landscapes. His name was Lawrence Tierney, and he was the scariest man who ever stepped in front of a motion picture camera. This isn't just a story about a film production. This is a story about what happens when a studio accidentally casts a real-life monster to play a fictional one. Welcome to the set where the violence wasn't always scripted, and the fear in the other actor's eyes wasn't always acting. But before we unlock the cage and let this story out, I need to know who I'm talking to. Pause for a second, go down to the comments right now. Tell me, where are you watching this from? Are you in a quiet room, or are you out there in the noise of the city? Drop your location. I want to see where our investigation is reaching tonight. Okay? You're strapped in? Good. Let's go back to 1947. The war was over. The world was traumatized, and film noir was at its peak. Shadows, rain, cigarettes, femme fatales. But Born to Kill was different. It was nastier. The critics at the time didn't just dislike it, they were repulsed by it. One critic famously wrote that the film made him feel dirty, like he needed to go home and take a shower to wash off the slime. Why? Because of Lawrence Tierney. To understand the chaos of this set, you have to understand the man. Tierney wasn't just an actor with a bad boy image. He was a walking police report. In Hollywood, there are tough guys, and then there are guys you cross the street to avoid. Tierney was the second kind. He was built like a truck, with cold, dead eyes that seemed to look right through you. He didn't act with technique, he acted with menace. By the time he was cast in Born to Kill, his reputation was already radioactive. He was known for tearing apart nightclubs with his bare hands. He was known for drinking until he blacked out, and then waking up in a jail cell, often with blood on his shirt that wasn't his. So why cast him? Because RKO Pictures needed a villain who could make the audience uncomfortable. They needed someone to play Sam Wilde, a sociopath who kills simply because he feels like it. They looked at Tierney and realized he doesn't have to act. And that brings us to the first hidden fact about this production. The director's nightmare. The man tasked with controlling this human grenade was Robert Wise. Now, if you know cinema, you know that name. Robert Wise later directed The Sound of Music and West Side Story. He was a gentleman, a craftsman, the editor of Citizen Kane. Putting Robert Wise in a room with Lawrence Tierney was like locking a librarian in a cage with a rabid pit bull. From day one, the tension on set was suffocating. Wise was a technical director. He wanted precision. He wanted marks hit. He wanted dialogue delivered exactly as written. Tierney didn't care about marks. Tierney barely cared about the script. There are reports from the crew that Tierney would show up to the set hungover, his eyes red, smelling like a distillery. Most actors would be fired, but they couldn't fire him. He was the movie, so Wise had to adapt. He started using shadows, heavy, deep noir shadows, not just for style, but to hide the fact that his lead actor looked like a wreck. If you watch the film closely, look at how often Tierney's face is half obscured. That's cinematic genius born out of desperation. But the real friction wasn't just between the director and the star. It was between the two leads. Enter Claire Trevor. She played the female lead, Helen. In the story, she discovers Sam Wilde is a murderer, and instead of calling the police, she gets turned on. She's attracted to his darkness. It's a twisted, sick dynamic. Romeo and Juliet in hell. But on set, Claire Trevor was terrified of him. She was a professional, a veteran, and here she was having to do intimate scenes with a man who was known for punching photographers and assaulting police officers. There is a scene, a famous scene in the kitchen, where the tension is so thick you can cut it with a knife. We will get to the details of that bloodbath later, but just know this, the look on her face when she stares at him, that mix of fascination and absolute terror, that wasn't the script, that was instinct. She was looking at a man who could snap at any moment, and he did snap. Not on camera, but off. Midway through production, Tierney vanished. Imagine the panic. You have a budget ticking away, you have a crew standing around, and your star is gone. Where was he? He was in jail. Again, he had gotten into a brawl at a bar the night before. He had beaten someone up or someone had beaten him up. It was usually both. The studio RKO had a fixer for these situations. A man with a briefcase full of cash whose job was to go to the police station, bribe the sergeant, and drag the actor back to the set before the press found out. They bailed him out in the morning. They threw him in a cold shower. They put makeup over the bruises, and they shoved him in front of the camera. Action. And Tierney, fueled by adrenaline and a hangover, delivered one of the coldest performances of the decade. It makes you wonder how much of what we see on screen is Sam Wilde, the character, and how much is Lawrence Tierney just hating the world. But the chaos didn't stop at the bar fights. It seeped into the very themes of the movie. You have to remember the context of 1947. The Hays Code, the censorship board, was all-powerful. The code had strict rules. Crime cannot pay. Murderers must be punished. Adultery is forbidden. Born to Kill looked at those rules and laughed. This movie features a double murder in the first 10 minutes. It features a main character who is a cold-blooded psychopath and a female lead who is morally bankrupt. The censors went crazy. They sent memo after memo to Robert Wise. You can't show this. You have to change that. This is too grotesque. But Wise, perhaps influenced by the chaotic energy of his star, pushed back. He kept the nastiness in. He created a film where the characters are compared to bugs. There is a line in the movie where a friend tells Helen, "You're just like him. You're both bugs." It was an insult, but it was also the truth. And speaking of bugs and dirt, let's talk about the visual style that hid the budget issues. RKO was known for low-budget horror and noir. They didn't have the money of MGM or Paramount. Born to Kill looks expensive, but it was shot on recycled sets. The Grand Mansion? Recycled. The train station? A painted backdrop and some smoke. Robert Wise used a technique called depth of field, keeping everything in focus to make the world feel larger. But he also used it to trap the characters. Notice the ceilings. In almost every indoor shot you see the ceiling. It presses down on the characters. It makes them look small. It makes the rooms feel like prison cells long before anyone actually goes to jail. It creates a sense of claustrophobia that matches the feeling of being around Lawrence Tierney. But the most disturbing part of the production wasn't the sets or the budget. It was a specific night of filming that involved a beach house, a dead body, and a total lack of empathy. This is where the line between fiction and reality dissolved completely. What Tierney did during the filming of the climax wasn't just unprofessional, it was borderline sociopathic, and it terrified the crew so much that some of them refused to make eye contact with him for the rest of the shoot. We are about to walk into the kitchen, the place where the bodies drop, the kitchen. In most homes it's a place of warmth. In Born to Kill it's a slaughterhouse. We are approaching the climax of the film, and this is where the production moved from difficult to psychologically dangerous. The scene required Lawrence Tierney to murder his only friend, Marty, and then turn his rage on Helen, the woman who was just as twisted as he was. Scripting a murder is easy. Type the words he shoots. Done. Filming a murder with Lawrence Tierney was a different beast. By this point in the shoot, the crew was exhausted. Tierney's behavior had been erratic. He would show up with fresh cuts on his knuckles. He would stare blankly at the wall between takes, mumbling to himself. There is a story, whispered by crew members, that during the filming of these violent scenes, Tierney didn't turn it on like an actor. When he grabbed an actor, he didn't fake the grip, he squeezed. When he glared, he wasn't imagining a motivation, he was letting his natural aggression surface. Walter Slezak, who played the detective trying to catch him, later said that working with Tierney was an experience in terror. Why? Because in a fight scene, trust is everything. You need to trust that the other guy won't actually break your nose. With Tierney, that trust didn't exist. Tierney was arrested over 12 times in Los Angeles alone between 1945 and 1951. He wasn't acting, and then came the moment that defined the film's nihilism, the double-crossing. Sam Wilde Tierney realizes he's been played, the paranoia takes over, and in true noir fashion, there is no monologue about redemption, there is just action. He kills his friend, a brutal silent betrayal, then he waits for Helen. The lighting in this scene is a masterclass by Robert Wise. The kitchen is dark, sliced by beams of light. Tierney stands in the shadows, almost like a creature of the night. When Claire Trevor walks in, she doesn't know she's walking into her grave. The confrontation that follows is ugly, not movie ugly, with dramatic music swelling. It feels nasty, it feels domestic and grimy. When the shots are fired and the bodies fall, the audience in 1947 was left in shock. Usually the villain dies in a shootout with the police, a blaze of glory, or he falls from a high place, a symbolic fall. Here, it's just messy. Bodies on the floor of a beach house. The Hays Code hated it. They demanded that the police arrive immediately. They demanded that justice be shown on screen. So, look closely at the very end of the movie. The police arrive seconds after the shooting. It feels rushed. It feels tacked on. That's because it was. Robert Wise had to insert the police almost artificially to satisfy the censors who were screaming, "You can't just leave everyone dead." Who wins? The answer the movie gives, if you ignore the forced police siren, is simple. Nobody wins. Everyone is rotten. The Hays Code censors called the script disgusting and tried to ban the film entirely, but the drama didn't end when the director yelled cut on the final scene. For most actors, wrapping a movie means a party, a vacation. For Lawrence Tierney, wrapping Born to Kill was just the start of a downward spiral that is almost impossible to believe. The studio RKO realized they had a problem. They had a great movie, but they had a star they couldn't market. How do you put Lawrence Tierney on a talk show? How do you let him do interviews? So Lawrence, tell us about the craft of acting. I don't know, I just wanted to punch the guy. It was a PR nightmare, and then the inevitable happened. The bad boy act stopped being an act. Shortly after the film's release, Tierney's rap sheet started to grow longer than his filmography. Drunk and disorderly, assault and battery, kicking a police officer. There was an incident in the 1950s, a few years after this film, where he literally fought 7 police officers at once outside a bar. 7. It took a swarm of cops to take him down. He was blacklisted. The phone stopped ringing. The studios closed their gates. Born to Kill became a tombstone. It was the peak of his career, and simultaneously the proof that he was too dangerous to employ. He spent the next few decades drifting. He did B-movies. He did prison time. He worked as a bartender. He drove a carriage in Central Park. The man who terrified America on screen was now just a terrifying guy in a dive bar. But Hollywood has a long memory, and it loves a monster. Decades later, in the 90s, a young video store clerk named Quentin Tarantino was writing a script about a diamond heist gone wrong. He needed a boss, a guy who looked like he had seen it all, a guy named Joe Cabot. He remembered Born to Kill. He remembered the cold eyes of Lawrence Tierney, so Tarantino hired him for Reservoir Dogs. And guess what? Tierney hadn't changed. He was in his 70s, but he was still the same Lawrence Tierney. On the set of Reservoir Dogs, he almost got into a fistfight with Tarantino. He refused to memorize his lines. He was grumpy, aggressive, and difficult. But he was perfect. When you see him in Reservoir Dogs, that gravelly voice, that intolerance for nonsense, that is the ghost of Sam Wilde, surviving 40 years of wreckage. Born to Kill was forgotten for a long time. It sat in the vaults, gathering dust, dismissed as too dark or too trashy. But today we look back at it, and we see it for what it really is. It's not just a movie. It's a documentary of a man's darkness. It captured a specific moment in time, where the ugliness of the post-war world met the ugliness of a tortured soul, and they created art. Most actors wear a mask. Lawrence Tierney took his mask off, and the world screamed. We are reaching the end of our file on this case, but there is one final piece of evidence we need to examine. What does this movie teach us about the price of authenticity? The credits roll, the lights come up, but the story of Born to Kill doesn't end in 1947. It lingers like the smell of stale cigarette smoke in a cheap motel room. Lawrence Tierney destroyed his own career with the efficiency of a demolition crew. He could have been the next Humphrey Bogart. He had the looks, he had the voice, he had the presence, but Bogart knew when to stop drinking. Tierney didn't. In the years following the film, Tierney became a ghost in Hollywood. He popped up in small roles, usually playing thugs or convicts, roles that required zero imagination for casting directors. We need a guy who looks like he's been in a fight. Call Tierney. He wasn't acting anymore. He was just renting out his scars. But here is the twist that makes this story legendary. In the 1990s, when Quentin Tarantino cast him in Reservoir Dogs, a new generation discovered him. They saw this old granite-faced man and thought, wow, he's intense. They didn't know the half of it. There is a story from the set of Reservoir Dogs that perfectly sums up the tragedy of Lawrence Tierney. The cast, Harvey Keitel, Tim Roth, Steve Buscemi, were all brilliant actors. They were pretending to be criminals. They were playing cops and robbers. Tierney, he was the real thing. He reportedly complained about the dialogue. He complained about the heat. He was difficult. But when the camera rolled on Joe Cabot, the boss, you believed him. You believed that if you crossed him, you wouldn't wake up. That authenticity, that raw, unfiltered danger, is what makes Born to Kill a masterpiece of the genre. It is a film that shouldn't exist. A film where the bad guy is truly bad, the girl is truly corrupt, and the ending feels like a punch in the gut. It's a reminder that sometimes the best special effect in a movie isn't CGI. It isn't a rubber mask. It's a human being who has stared into the abyss and didn't blink. Lawrence Tierney died in 2002. He lived to be 82 years old. How he survived that long is a medical mystery. Between the alcohol, the street fights, the stab wounds. Yes, he was stabbed in a fight in the 50s and survived. He should have died 10 times over. Maybe he was too tough to die. Or maybe, like Sam Wilde, he was just too stubborn to quit. Born to Kill stands today as his monument. A dark, dirty, beautiful monument to the bad boys of cinema. So the next time you watch a modern thriller and you see a villain who looks a little too polished, a little too clean, remember Lawrence Tierney. Remember the man who didn't need to act scary because he was the nightmare. Now I have a question for the jury. Do you think an actor like Lawrence Tierney, someone so volatile and dangerous, would be allowed to work in Hollywood today? Or would cancel culture and HR departments shut him down before the first audition? Is there room for true chaos in modern cinema? Let me know your verdict in the comments. I read everything, and if you want more case files on the films that Hollywood tried to bury, more stories about the crimes behind the cameras, smash that subscribe button, ring the bell, because in this town the darkest stories are the only ones worth telling. Class dismissed.